Hi, I'm Jade. I wanted to do a video today about the difference between my first and second pregnancy and the lead up to the birth. So not to alarm, but I'm basically going to go into labour any second. So you can see the hospital bags behind me, all packed. I wanted to cover a bit about how I was when I was expecting to go into labour for my first baby, which was in 2017, and I wasn't very well with OCD, and what's different this time. But more importantly, it's not really about what's different this time, it's more about what I did to make it different. So, out of breath. A lot of the time with pregnancy that I notice with people when they're looking at, well, should I have another baby after a difficult experience with OCD on their first one, is really what I'd say is if you haven't really changed anything in how you're coping with your OCD or not really done anything on recovery, I'm not sure how it can be any different other than being a bit more prepared for what's to come and handling it a little better because it's not so much of a shock. This time couldn't really be more different than the first time. I remember quite vividly in the lead up to her arriving, my little girl 3 years ago, just feeling really unsure, so much anxiety in the background. I was in a lot of avoidance. I had no idea what to expect. I'd only found out I had OCD 2 months before she was born, so it wasn't very long to even make sense of what it was I'd been going through all those years. But also it was no time at all to actually do anything about it. So in some ways it was like, oh my God, how is this gonna get me? The piece of advice I received from a therapist was, yeah, let's do some exposures and let's work on recovery. But what actually, the main thing I got was, look, when you have her, you'll see her, your maternal instincts will kick in and I think it will all go. So I think part of me was in a bit of disillusion of, oh, this is just going to go away by itself now that I know it's OCD. And once I meet my baby, I'm going to be fine. So it's really strange because I did feel that like hormones took over in the sense of you feel that lovely gooiness that every person feels when they have a baby. But it was just tainted by fear. So I remember one of the most interesting things I've got on my phone is a video of when they first passed my baby to me and I just held her and I was like cuddling her about to feed. And just as the video tailed off, I literally said, oh, I'm just a bit concerned about where, like her position, where is she laying? And then the video cut off. And if for anyone else that would just look or whatever, but if you have OCD like I did, specifically around being a mum and a parent and children and harm and things like that, you'd see the fear in my eyes of like, I'd only just held my baby and I was already panicking about how I was holding her, what position she was in, feeling really uncomfortable with, say, skin to skin contact with my baby, just feeling really just ridden with anxiety. But I sort of ran away from it all. So that was the interesting thing that I found thinking back to it. And then, yeah, I just remember just absolutely hitting a wall a few days later with OCD, just absolutely taking over. The therapy I was having as well was a lot around disproving the thoughts. So it's like, oh, well, obviously you don't like the thoughts, so that must mean they're not true. And if you have an intrusive thought, maybe just do something like go for a walk or jump around. It's almost like a distraction, but to a point where it was sort of becoming compulsive, that if I had a thought, I had to get away from it. And that felt like reasonable as a way to handle it because you want to get away from these thoughts. So every time I had overwhelming intrusive thoughts, I would just go for a long walk and walk and walk and walk, which is really good. It's really good in the sense of it takes you away from just mulling in it, but nothing was happening to make me better. So I lost, most people obviously gain weight after having kids. But when mine was born, I lost probably about 2 stone. I looked very, very thin and quite unwell, I think. Everyone else was like, oh, how have you managed to get your body back after having a baby? And I was just like losing weight every day. It was awful. And yeah, it was just complete. It was it was just completely overwhelming as an experience, being thrown into being a mother, comparing myself to others a huge amount. I mean, I don't know if any of you mums or dads have gone to baby groups and just sat there looking around thinking, I would give anything for your brain. Can we just swap? And hearing them complain about normal things like, oh, you know, we're not getting much sleep, or I don't know what nappy brand to buy. I'm boring myself. Yeah, those sort of conversations, I would just sit there thinking I would give anything to have those worries. I remember dreading certain aspects of taking care of a baby, like bath times. I'd be crying to my husband, or anything where I had to take care of my little girl, I would just be panicking, putting it off, crying. You know, ultimately I'd brought my biggest trigger into my house, so it was really difficult. I struggled for the first 9 months of her life massively. And then when I started having coaching with OCD recovery coaching, we got straight into it quite quickly. And were able to work out my irrational fears and my beliefs, look at the right exposures and build on the ones I'd already been doing. And I just had a bit more of a path to take. So about a year's really, really hard work and relentless, I have to do this mentality. I think that we coast in OCD recovery a lot. I think that's quite a normal part of it. So I might have gone 6 months coasting because feeling a little bit better is quite nice, and then have a bit of a relapse and go, right, I've got to get on with this. I've got to work hard again, and then really go for it and make steps forward. So one of the things I'd say that to ask yourself if you don't feel like you're making progress after having a baby and having quite nasty OCD is, am I really, really going for it with my homework and my exposures and all of my recovery work? Because I think once we're honest ourselves about are we, and we really make that commitment, like a relentless commitment of no matter what, no matter how triggered I feel from this exposure work, no matter how bad it feels, I have to keep working at it. And you sort of, one of the other girls in my group, Erica, she once said something to me like, you've got to, like, what's that saying with jumping off? You've got to jump into the deep end, or you've really got to just jump into the unknown. You have to trust yourself to go there. Anyway, just wanted to stress that amount of work that was needed for me to smash through a lot of OCD fears. Now, I'm not like 100% recovered. I can still get triggered, but I tend to find that if I'm triggered, it's very short-lived, and I can really notice it and be like, oh, it's funny, it's interesting, and I know the tools to get past those. So I've chipped away at about 80% of my fears, and there's a few left. But they don't scare me that much because I know what I need to do in order to get better from them. With this baby, due, like, could happen now. I feel excited to meet her. I feel confident that even if I did have a relapse, which I don't see it as being possible to be how I was with my first daughter because of the progress I've made. But even if I do, I'm not that scared of it because I know I got through it once and I know I can get through it again. And the analogy I was thinking of the other day was like, you know, like when you're a kid and you're scared of the dark and your parents shut the door and you're like terrified. It's kind of like you can't, once you're no longer scared of the dark, you can't not be scared of the dark. You can't just suddenly get scared of the dark again. So like if someone said, when you're going to sleep as a grown-up, you've just shut the door, what if you get scared? I'm like, what? What if you get scared of the dark again? I'd be like, well, I'm not, why would I be, there's nothing to be scared of. I understand that now. When I was a kid, I was being a bit silly being scared of the dark. Why would I all of a sudden get scared of it again? I'm not scared of it anymore. And that's sort of how it feels, because people often ask, aren't you scared you'll relapse? But it's kind of hard to relapse because OCD only latches to what you're scared of. So by working on the things you're scared of and learning to become not scared of them anymore, it just really helps you with that. So I would say for that, look at the videos on this channel on unconditional self and life acceptance and the rational thinking, because that is pretty much life-changing, that sort of stuff. That's really helped me. Like even with the birth, so as my first daughter, I had a very rigid birth plan of like, this is how I want it to go. And that's great because going into birth illuminated and understanding how everything works. But it was very much, I must have this, it must be like that, I really want it to be this, otherwise it's awful. And this time I'm like, I've got some preferences of how I'd like it to go, and I've worked hard to like be ready for birth, but totally at ease with whatever happens, and whatever has to happen. And a really good example of this, of thinking rationally, was I've been told my husband has to leave me after 2 hours from the baby being born. And I really think I would have just hit the roof with that a few years ago when my daughter was due, because I would have been like, oh, that's awful, I can't be away from him, I can't do that on my own. And now I'm like, you know, it's nice if he's there, but I can be fine on my own. In fact, I might get more sleep. So it just applies to so many areas of life, this rational thinking. My brain's really slow, so I'm sorry that I'm struggling to come up with what I'm meant to be talking about. The other area I wanted to cover with how this pregnancy is different is I'm just more confident in myself and who I am. I'm not trying to compare to other mothers. I'm comfortable that I have OCD, and that makes me a bit different in some ways. But in other ways, it's made me, I think, a better mum, because I don't think there's anything my kids could go through as they grow up that I wouldn't be really understanding of. And having suffered myself and come through the other side, I'm actually quite pleased with myself. Like I walk around and see people like not handling situations very well in my view, and you know, not understanding other people's suffering or downplaying it, or finding small things really stressful. Like I don't know if any other OCD sufferers are like this, but I find it takes quite a lot for me to be stressed out about something, because when you really suffered with your mental health and then you get through it, it's almost like nothing's a big deal. Like, you know, I can handle most things. So I feel like it's given me a resilience. And in parenting, I just find parenting a doddle now. Like now that I'm not suffering with OCD, it's very much every now and then it spikes and I have to look at it and revisit a few tools, but day to day, I don't feel anxious at all. Maybe a little bit of background sometimes that I can't put my finger on. So yeah, it's sort of like with being a mum, my daughter could like have tantrums all day, every day, and I would still obviously be challenging, but it's not something that would break me. I'm not worried. I'm not nervous when she's a teenager. There's no real life mission challenge thing that I'm nervous about. And I think that's a really good point with OCD suffering and recovery. It's not just about stopping anxiety. It's about how life can be better on the other side. I'm actually just really thoroughly enjoying being a parent now. I used to think my goal was get through the day, be able to eat more than 2 crackers without being sick. That was like my reality. I wanted to go 10 minutes with peace in my head, and now I'm more just so excited for the future of like seeing my daughters grow up together and have a lovely relationship and inspiring them, helping them. It's not just about getting by. And I think, unfortunately, for OCD recovery and people with OCD, we're suffering so badly that to us heaven is just getting through the day. But I just think there can be a lot more than that. My baby brain is making me waffle so much today. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. But my message to anybody who has one baby and has struggled with their OCD in a big way like I did, and just sort of weighing up, should I have another one? I would just say really try and book in some coaching or therapy. I used OCD recovery coaching and I've been really happy with that. But obviously whoever you're working with, and just make yourself a plan of, well, what do I need to do to conquer these fears, and how can I progress before? Because if I hadn't done this work on recovery, my experience now would probably be about the same. But I'm going in with 2 really good things. One is that I'm no longer triggered and scared of things I used to be, and the second is I'm actually not afraid of relapsing anyway. I'm just at peace with whatever will happen. So hope that was useful. But the one thing I would say is, I really would say, don't let it hold you back from having children if it's what you want. I can't stress how unwell I was, and how well I am now in comparison. So I hope that was useful. I've been holding my baby's little toy the whole time. And yeah, hopefully in the next few days I'll have another baby, and I will do another video to cover the early days, if that's useful to anyone, of how it is different, and how far I've come with that. Thank you.